So we're looking at learning outcome 3, which is understand the regulation and inspection of health and social care services. And like I said, there's only 2 assessment criteria. 3.1 is explain the regulatory system that underpins service delivery. And then 3.2 is describe the process of inspection for health and social care services. So I'll make my way over now. Make that bigger. There you go. So we're just going to go straight into 3.1, which is explain the regulatory system that underpins service delivery. So we're just going to look at regulators like the watchdogs that are there. So, you know, for schools, we have Ofsted, where they'll come in and they'll make sure that they'll come and do inspections. They'll make sure that all the teachers are working to standard, all the teaching is the right way that it should be. So they make sure that everything is being done. Now, the regulators here do the same thing, but again, it's just for healthcare. So regulation does play quite a big role in the healthcare industry and also for healthcare insurance coverage. Now, there's a lot of regulatory bodies around for different professions, and I will go through this. I think I've got a list of about 12 or so, which I'll go through with you. But for the purpose of what we're going to do today, we're going to be focusing on the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, quite largely on there. Now, these regulatory agencies, they're there to protect and regulate public health at every level and also to protect the public from health risks that could happen. So, which organisation inspects and regulates the health and social care industry? It's a CQC, like I just said, this Care Quality Commission. Now, this was established in 2009 and it's actually independent. So, it's an independent health and social care regulator for England. It's got a few responsibilities. So, it does the registration, the regulation, the inspection, and it also gives all of the providers a rating as well. So if you just imagine, like if you go to a hotel, you've got the 5-star type of coverage, don't you? This is a 4-star, this is a 5-star, this is a 2-star. So they'll actually rate the providers and say, yeah, this care home has got this rating, this other care home has got that rating, and so on.
So it's just like a food hygiene rating, isn't it? In like a takeaway or a restaurant or something like that, and you get given a score from 1 to 5, but this is obviously stars instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the CQC's objectives, so their main objective is to protect and promote the health and safety and welfare of people who use health and social care services. Now, this actually has included within it the NHS and the local authorities, but it's also an independent provider that they will cover as well. So they'll do NHS, all the local authorities and all the independent providers. So overall, they look after everyone. Now, the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, has a lot of different functions that it covers. So it covers the improvement of health and social care services. It covers the provision of health and social care services in a way that focuses on the needs and experiences of people who use their services. So in a way, point number 2 really focuses on person-centered care and approach, which we've covered briefly before. And number 3, it also covers the efficient and effective use of resources in the provision of health and social care services. So the resources, just the items, the equipment that they've got. Now, that was a CQC. Are you okay with the CQC, or do you want to go over anything?
No, it's just it's point in place, isn't it? So yeah, it's that to follow.
Yeah. So there are about 12 health and social care regulators, and this includes the Health and Care Professionals Council, which they call HCPC. Now, these regulators have a role to protect the public. Now, there's a regulator for different careers that you might be in within healthcare. So I'm just going to go through who they are and go through. Some of them have like one occupation they cover, some of them cover quite a lot, but I'll go through those. So you've got the General Chiropractic Council, and they do chiropractors. And if I'm correct, that's to do with bones. I could be wrong. I can never remember that one. Then you've got the General Dental Council, so they regulate dentists, dental therapists, dental nurses, dental technicians, so anybody that is within the dentistry services. You've got the General Medical Council, GMC, they regulate doctors. General Optical Council, they look at dispensing opticians and optometrists. Then you've got the Osteopathic Council, which does osteopaths. The Nursing and Midwifery Council, NMC, which is nurses, midwives, and specialist community public health nurses. We're almost at the end. Then you've got the Health and Care Professions Council, and this has got a very big list of who they cover. And I won't read through all of them, but they do art therapists, occupational therapists, they've got orthoptists, paramedics, physiotherapists, radiographers, social workers, and speech and language therapists, to name a few. Then you have the General Pharmaceutical Council. So they do pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and also the premises, the building that they're in. Then you've got the Pharmaceutical Society of Northern Ireland. So this is the same as what I've just said above, but it's only for Northern Ireland. Then you've got the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. And, you know, for the HCPC, they did social care workers within that, but this is for Northern Ireland, and they only do it in that area. Then for Wales only, social care, that's the social care workforce. And then you've got the Scottish Social Services Council, and they're responsible for registering anybody that works in social services in Scotland only. So that was a long list there. And then this is just a little a bit of information about regulation and monitoring, how it works, what does each sector do, what does the Nursing Midwifery Council do, what does the General Medical Council do. So they set standards, they put down you know, standards for how much training you need to be doing, how much CPD you need to log per year, what your performance is, what your conduct is. So if you get a chance, come back and read this. It's a little bit too much information for me to go through now, but it's nice for you to have a bit of background when you're doing it. Now, Lee, when you're actually going to answer this question, I just want you to focus on the CQC. The only reason I've put all the other regulators in is just for your knowledge, so you know who is there and what they cover. But to answer this question, we need more information about who the CQC is, what they do, what sort of services they are, and that's it.
Well, if I do that, the CQC, you know the other ones, can I throw like a few other ones in there as well?
You can
and just explain.
Yeah. Do most of your focus on the CQC, and then for the other ones, you can mention them and, you know, put a couple of paragraphs in for them as well. Yeah,
no worries.
So do you want to go over anything before we go into 3.2?
Nah. Well, when you said dentist, it reminded me of, I went to the dentist not long ago, and I've gone in, and I'm sat in the chair, and I'm not joking. I don't know where this lady was from, but I couldn't really understand what she was saying. And she had this mask on that looked like she was in World War II or something. I'm thinking, flipping heck.
And, was a gas mask.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. So at this point, I'm panicking a bit, thinking, oh, flipping heck, my tooth. Anyway, she stood behind me, and I look up, and she's got this big dirty needle thing, just putting this chamber in and then squeezing the bottom of it. And then she started to put it in my mouth. She didn't even tell me what she was going to do or anything. So I like pat her hand away. I said, "Whoa, you've not even told me what you're doing." She went, "You're very nervous. You have to go to hospital." You're having a laugh. But yeah, just when you mentioned dentist, just before that, it just reminded me of that story.
But that's, do you know, I've been to the dentist since the pandemic has been on, and the most my dentist does is put one of those normal masks on, and it's quite scary, because being in the dentist, having your mouth messed about with anyway, and then having someone like that with that big enormous, no, I'm not surprised you were feeling a bit like, what's going on here?
Oh, I was panicking. Like, I'm not a scared person, you know. But when I seen that, I thought, flipping. And then when she tried to put it in my mouth, I thought, wow, you've not even told me what you're doing. Like, what you doing? And
So did you get your tooth sorted out, or did she refer you to the hospital then?
she referred me to the hospital because I refused to go back to her, and I got someone else instead. Well, then they put a filling in, and it fell out the next day. So
you know what,
I got that dentist off.
You know, yeah. They're not. I've noticed that certain dentists' fillings don't fall out. The one that I go to now, they're really good. But previous dentists that I used to go to, the day after you'd have your meal or whatever, and it'd be crunching through your filling, and it'd be just like, what is this? So I think it just depends on how they do it.
Yeah.
So 3.2 is describe the process of inspection for health and social care services. Now, we talked about who the regulatory people are, who looks out for them, who makes sure that you're, following all the standards and all the patients are being looked after the way they need to. Now, we're going to look at how it gets inspected. What happens if something is going wrong and an inspection needs to be taken place, or even a regular because places like GPs, healthcare, social care homes, all of those places, they still do get inspected to make sure that they're working properly. So this is how it happens. So the CQC, they've got standards and policies to support key inspections and random inspections as well. So sometimes you'll know you're going to get inspected, sometimes they'll just show up unannounced. So the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, do have a lot of powers that allow them to protect the public and to hold registered providers and managers to account. So they also got an enforcement policy. Now I've linked this enforcement policy into the references section. I'll show you where it is because I think it's quite a nice, easy read, and it gives you a lot of information. I quite liked going through it, but I've not put everything in from it, but I've picked up key points. But if you have the time, go through it. It's a nice bit of information to know in general.
Yeah.
So this enforcement policy, it just explains what approach they can take, what action they can take, especially when they identify poor care or where they see registered providers and managers are not meeting their standards that are required as part of the regulations. So they have a 4-step process which I'll go through, but they use their enforcement policy to protect people who use regulated services from harm and also from the risk of harm, and they ensure to receive health and social care services of an appropriate standard. So they try to make sure that the standards are being covered. And then again, anybody who wants to work within healthcare needs to be registered with the CQC. You can't be working within healthcare without being registered with them. So all of the registered providers and the managers have to account for their failures. They've got to talk about why this failure happened, how it could have happened, and how it affected their service, and then, try and work towards fixing those issues. So what do the CQC enforce? We've got a couple of points here. So point 1, the providers of any regulated activity in England has to be registered. So like I said, any healthcare regulators or providers have to be registered with the CQC. Number 2, they take enforcement against registered persons or also providers and managers who breach the following. So if they breach the conditions of registration, and also if they breach the relevant sections of the Health and Social Care Act, the Quality Commission regulations, the Health and Social Care Act, the regulated activities regulations, and any other legislation like equality and diversity, human rights, all of those. So if they breach any of them, then they're going to get inspected. Enforcement is going to happen. Now, the regulations are quite focused now. They used to have previous regulations a number of years ago, and from when we've gone through safeguarding units and so on, where we've talked about how the Winterbourne case, how things were ignored. Now, that's the reason that they've got more focused regulations now, because rather than disregarding something and saying, oh, these people are under the Mental Capacity Act, they're going to be making things up. Instead of making assumptions and believing that, yeah, they're wrong, we don't need to cover this. Because there was a lot of shortcomings in those previous regulations. They weren't really focusing on the care that needs to be given. So these new ones are much, much better. They're more focused, and they also allow direct prosecution when any standards are breached. So the CQC actually have a lot more powers now. Now, where any breaches of their regulations that they've set, their standards that they've set, doesn't make a criminal offence. Like they've breached the standards, they're not doing the right duty of care, but they've not really done a criminal offence. The CQC will also just enforce their own standards. They'll make sure that those places cover those standards and go towards them. They'll use their civil powers to do it. So the CQC will put conditions in place. If those conditions are not met, then they can suspend a registration or cancel a registration, meaning that that care home, that health provider can't work again. And again, if they don't comply with the steps, so what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll say, you've got these steps to meet because you're not quite up to standard. If that company doesn't follow those steps and doesn't comply with those steps, the CQC will use their civil powers again, and they'll say it's a criminal offence, and they might get a prosecution at the end of it, so fines or jail time. So are we okay so far? Because I know I keep talking about civil powers and prosecution and so on.
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, CQC, they're there to just make sure that the workplace is running how it should be running, and that everything's getting met, all the regulations and the acts, and they're there. They're there for I think they're there for the employers and the employees' benefits as well, in the sense that if something does happen, then it's down to the employer for not doing the job. So it kind of makes the employer on guard, you know what I mean? So an employer's not just going to be like kicking back when things are happening, or it'll just sort itself out. It's going to get dealt with the way it should be dealt with. Otherwise, there's going to be fines, and there's going to be some sort of punishments or disciplinary action based on the action of the employer, you know, in that moment. So I don't agree with them giving you time to say, right, we're going to come on such a day, because someone could just have a bad workplace and then a day before they're due to come in, just clean everything up. But it's the unexpected visits, because the unexpected visits, it keeps you on your toes.
Because I've been through many Ofsted inspections that we know that are coming up, and we have so much we've got like 24 hours to prepare. In those 24 hours, you can actually get a lot of things done. So on our part, it was making sure that the students' books were marked, and, you know, you've got comments here, everything's all put into folders. So that's something that really should be happening on a normal standard anyway. But as humans, we tend to get lazy, and we tend to, you know, push things away and say, oh, we'll do it later, and it's okay. But like, I agree with you, all those random inspections really do help, because you don't know when they're coming. It forces you to actually just keep on track and follow those conditions, isn't it?
That's it. And that's what it's about. If you know when something's coming, then you're going to make sure for that day that everything's as it should be, as best that it can be. But if it's unexpected, then, and you're not prepared for it, then, you know, they get a true idea of how the workplace is actually running.
Exactly. So to go on it, we've got this image that I've popped in. It's about their enforcement powers and what they actually do. So it starts off with the, you know, they'll come in, they'll give you a requirement notice. It used to be known as compliance actions. They'll give you warnings and so on. So it increases in its severity, so it increases in how extreme it is. Then they'll go into the second stage, where they'll look at the civil enforcement powers and they'll start imposing those. They'll put conditions on, they'll take conditions off, they might get rid of your registration, they might suspend you or cancel you, or they might say this has to be done urgently. And again, they might put down any special measures where they'll say you've got this much time to fix this, or, you know, we're going to do this, that, and the other with you. And then the most severe account is where they'll go on to criminal powers, where they'll give cautions, they'll give penalty notices, and they'll also go on to prosecution. But then within that, for example, if it's a company, they'll actually look at individuals within that company as well, within that care home, within that provider, and then they'll make sure that those people that are working there are fit and proper to actually work there. And then they'll start prosecuting individuals. For example, if there's one particular staff member who's quite rough with patients or isn't quite meeting the standards on a regular basis and isn't trying to improve themselves, then they can prosecute the individuals within the organization as well. So that's just a nutshell, and we'll go into details with that. So they've got that 4-stage process that I was talking about. So it's just called a decision tree. It starts off with an initial assessment, then you go into a legal and evidential review. The stage 3 is selection of the appropriate enforcement action, and stage 4 is the final review. So I've done it a bit more detail in the following slides. So you've got your initial assessment, so they look at urgent cases, and they might just proceed to directly collecting evidence. So if there's an urgent case or urgent prosecution that needs to be done, they'll just come in, they'll do the assessment, and they'll start collecting any evidence that will work towards it. Stage 2 is legal and evidential review. So at this stage, they're just going to check the evidence that they've got, and they're going to see that evidence. Does it actually demonstrate the breach of the regulations? Does it show that those standards are not being met? So they'll check the evidence is good and sufficient, and it'll help them to proceed to take enforcement action. Then they'll do the initial logging, and they'll register evidence, and they'll make sure everything's been done correctly at this stage. Stage 3 is the selection of appropriate enforcement action. So this stage, when the inspectors go to the place that they're looking at, they'll go through a series of tests, and these tests will help them to make a decision about what sort of option for enforcement they need to do. So this is when they look at that enforcement tree that I showed you, and it just sets out the criteria of what needs to be done. So it assists the CQC. So they look at the seriousness of the concerns, and then they look at the evidence of multiple or persistent breaches. So there might be one breach that's happening consistently, or there might be 4, 5, 6 breaches that are always happening. And then number 4 is the final review. So they'll got all the evidence now. They did the assessment, they gathered evidence. Now they've decided what sort of steps they're going to take, and now they're going to do a final review. So they're going to see what the decision is, what enforcement action they're actually going to do, and then they will hold an MRM meeting, which is a management review meeting. And this is where the CQC's enforcement priorities will be discussed and considered. They'll say, okay, we'll take their license away, or we'll give them some steps that they need to work towards. Depending on what the issue is, they'll work in accordance to that. Now, this final review, it also looks at recommendations. So it'll see, is this the correct way that we need to go for this enforcement? Are we following the policy? Are we making a good decision process? You know, have we followed everything to do with the CQC's decisions and their scheme? Have we made sure that we're doing it all in a correct way? And they'll also get legal advice, and they'll also have a big paper trail, like an audit trail, where they'll make sure that they've got everything that they're going to do, that they've got it backed up, like set in stone, before they carry it out. So that's the CQC's inspection services. Now, we do have another service that does inspection as well, and that is the National Minimum Standards. Now, either you'll have heard of this, or you will hear of this coming on. Now, we've got the national. Have you heard of it? Yeah, it's for the health. Yeah, so it's just national minimum standards that any healthcare worker has to have. Now, this is something that a person should have, especially if they're going to be working one-to-one with someone. They need to have their certification and the standards already met. Now, sometimes agencies will send a lot of unqualified staff out to work one-to-one with their service users. And I know personally that it still does happen, but it's not meant to happen. It's meant to be that if you're going to work one-to-one with the service user, you need to have the right certification at showing that you're meeting the training standards, so you know exactly what you should do.
You know them points there, you've got 1 to 10, are they for the level 3, the health and social care level 3? Because you've got personal development, which is in level 3, effective communication level 3, quality diversity in level 3, duty of care, safeguarding, person-centred and support, which is about them, health and safety, which is everywhere, handling information, which is data protection and all that stuff, infection prevention and control. It's all it's level 3, isn't it?
It is technically level 3, this, because this is a thing on its own. So if you want to go in to do healthcare, this is what you need to do. You need to just go in, do the certificate, do it. Your workplace should provide you with training so you can get a certificate out of it. But again, all of this gets covered, all of these healthcare courses that we go over, because these are the minimum standards. They will follow these in a nutshell. So what you're seeing here, you'll see it in level 3, 4. There's a lot of things in here that when I teach level 5 and 6, they're in there as well. But obviously, the deepness of them changes a little bit.
Yes.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah. So you've got your roles of your healthcare, your personal development, effective communication, equality, diversity, inclusion, duty of care, safeguarding, person-centered care and support, health and safety, handling information, and infection prevention and control. So these are your minimum standards. Now, these standards, they just define the minimum, the basic minimum that you should know about working with people. So it really doesn't matter about what your work role is. You could be in administration, you could be in management, you could be on the floor working. So it really doesn't matter what your position is. You should have these minimum standards and you should be covered for them. So when you get this knowledge, you normally get it through your induction here. So if you've, say for example, you've newly qualified and you've done this course and you go on and you want to do a job, when you start working at that place, they should be providing you with an induction and giving you these standards to help you achieve these standards within the first few weeks. And if I remember correctly, you normally get a certificate out of it saying that you've met these standards. When you go ahead and you go into other jobs, you probably won't need to take part in it because you've already got the standards and the certification to show you've done it. So when you're meeting these minimum standards, it doesn't actually mean that you're competent in a role. It doesn't mean you're the most fantastic person who can do your work. It's got nothing to do with that. All it means is that you know what the basic standards are. You know what the minimum things that you need to meet are. You've got the information, you've got the knowledge. So that's got nothing to do with how great you are at your job or not. Because some people will have the knowledge and they'll be fantastic at the job. Some people will have the knowledge and they might be mediocre. They might not be the greatest workers in the world. You know, they might try to just faff things off and push their jobs onto someone else and not do what they're meant to do. But again, these standards, they can't control what you're like in your own role. All they do is provide you with information and help you to get like that foundation, that basic block to give safe and effective practice. So just to give, you know what they say, it's better to have knowledge than not.
Yes.
And then with these, the standards, they just sort of underpin your knowledge within the core competencies for health support workers. And like you pointed out very succinctly with this, was you've said straight away, seeing those points, that they more or less cover level 3, and they do. They cover so many standards. You'll recognize so many of those things that you're doing in level 4 now as well. Level 5, 6, and 7. The differences with the 6s and 7s is that they go more into the management and financial side of things, but the basics are all there. So, is there anything you'd like to go over, because we're on the last bit for this?
Yeah, just the process thing. I was thinking, you know, when you're going through the process of, like, when you look at the process of anything, and anything in life's a process. I mean, you could go to your door and, you know, you open your front door to go out. You assess the situation. Is it safe? Is there anything going on before I walk out my front door? Then you review the evidence. You know, is it safe? Is it raining? Is the people fighting? Whatever it is, then you select an action. So then you think, right, I'm going to either go left or right. So and then you make a decision on the action, the selection that you've just made, and then you do it. So anything in life's a process, and that's what I was thinking of then. Like anything, even eating and sleeping, it's all one big massive, like it's a process.
So it's true, isn't it? Because you do go through like certain steps and certain things when you're, even doing basic things like you're saying, opening the door, deciding should I wear my sandals or my boots, or do I need an umbrella today? But yeah, it is. So I'm going to